JD Vance, wo es Fertigung gibt, gibt es Innovation. Der US-Vizepräsident stellte die übermäßige Auslagerung und die Verwundbarkeit der Lieferketten stark in Frage.
I sort of figured it would be like, it's about jobs, maybe security. And Americans actually picked dynamism and growth as, by a significant margin, that was their top reason they cared. And that was across political groups, that was across classes, less educated, more educated, high income, low income. And exactly to your point, I think it's just something we don't give people enough credit for. I mean, not only are they quite wise in this respect, they are so much wiser than the economists who got this exactly wrong for so long. I was struck by the speech that you gave at the American Dynamism Conference, which I think touched on a lot of this, because you focused on what is on one hand a real challenge in the new conservative coalition, where on one hand you have the working class, you have labor, on the other hand you have technologists, folks who are very focused on innovation. And I think you made what is such a critical point, which is that these are not necessarily in conflict. Ultimately, success is defined by the extent to which we synthesize these things.
Yes.
I think conceptually, in my mind, that's absolutely right. In practice, that can still be hard. I think there are a lot of places where you still see these collisions. Where do you see the biggest opportunity to actually bring these folks together, to actually build on that idea and show that, no, in fact, you do have the same interests, there is a real opportunity to move forward here?
Well, I think that it's interesting you mentioned the American Dynamism speech, because I do think that's actually where the synthesis is, right? That if you believe in growth and you believe that, to have any opportunity to make people's lives better, you actually need sustained GDP growth, then you actually need to have the kind of industries that can support broad-based technological innovation. And so I think that really is the combination. Like, why do I care so much about manufacturing? And why do I care so much about the kind of educational institutions we have to support those industries? It's because, yes, I care about workers and I care about their wages, but I do very much care about innovation, and I don't think you can have one without the other, right? So the classic way of talking about this is to say, well, if you open up an iPhone and you look at the box, it will say designed in Cupertino, California, right? And of course, the implication is that it's manufactured in Shenzhen. In reality, it's not necessarily even designed in Cupertino, California anymore. It's increasingly designed in the place that's manufacturing it. This idea that we can separate the making of things from the innovating of things is, I think, totally farcical. You see this in pharmaceuticals in particular, where I think the countries that are really good at manufacturing pharmaceuticals, especially like the next-gen biologics and large molecule pharmaceuticals, those guys are increasingly really, really good at innovating in pharmaceuticals too. And one way this has come up in our work in the White House, and I won't get into sort of too many of the hairy details, but we've been thinking about how to solve a particular problem, meaning a particular kind of product that right now we have access to, but we're starting to ask ourselves these questions about, like, well, what happens if the country that we're trading with completely cut off access to this stuff? And so we're thinking a lot about the supply chain, about how brittle our supply chains are. And by the way, one thing that is shocking about the prior government, about the government we inherited the White House from, is if I, on January the 21st, in fact, I did ask this question, where are the biggest deficiencies in our supply chains? What are the 100 products that we're completely reliant on some other entity to make for us? Where are they made, and how hard would it be to onshore that manufacturing? I asked that explicit question, and the answer was, we don't know. Nobody in the prior government had actually asked these very fundamental questions. And so what is so crazy about the hyper-globalized era is that you had these basic questions about the brittleness of our supply chains that were completely uninvestigated by the very people who supported globalizing those supply chains. We were actually governed by complete morons, and we didn't even realize it until the Trump administration started to get underneath the hood of our government. But to take it back to sort of the point that I was trying to make. Okay, if you want to onshore this one piece of the supply chain, what kind of talent would you need in the labor force to make that possible? And I started talking to, venture capitalists and technologists and people who run sort of industries in this space. And what kept on coming back is, okay, yes, there's a tariff question, there's a revenue guarantee question, there's a capital question. How do you actually form the capital? How do you get the capital goods necessary to make the stuff that you're going to have to make? But the thing that everybody kept on coming back to is we don't even have the people who are skilled in this particular trade anymore, because we've so offshored it. And you realize the point about trade policy, all of this stuff is connected, but when you atrophy critical skills in the economy, it's not easy just to flip that switch back on. And I think that was the way in which the advocates of globalization were the most wrong, is they allowed the best skilled trades workforce in the history of the world to become a little bit atrophied. And I think we're still very good. Like, we actually have a pretty strong foundation from which to build, but we're actually not as good as we were 30 years ago. And the basic question of skilled craftsmen who are able to do a whole host of different things very rapidly. That's one of the things that we have to fix in order for us to accomplish the things that we need to accomplish. The president's very focused on that, but it drives home, how much of a national emergency we're in, that we've lost critical skills, and we weren't even aware that we had lost those skills until a few months ago.
Yeah, and of course, the part that drives me nuts about it is the same people who said it does not matter where things get made.
Yes.
It does not matter if all this goes overseas. Now it's overseas, you say, like, well, why can't we bring it back? And they say, oh, well, because we lost all the expertise. The expertise is super important. And you want to,
right.
Somewhere you wonder, like, do they even, like, are they trying to lose? It's rough.
I think it's very hard for them to realize that the sum of their work, and a lot of these people are good people, a lot of them are well-intentioned. It's very hard, and I saw this in the United States Senate, to look back on a 30, 40, or 50-year career and say, the very thing that I tried to do, I accomplished the opposite, right? It takes a special person to be able to actually change and pivot and accept new information. And unfortunately, we just don't have a lot of those people in the leadership class of the country. The way in which this is most absurd is the people who are most pro-globalization, the people who are most indifferent to whether a given part of the supply chain existed here or China or Russia or somewhere else, those are very often the same people who want us to fight wars all over the world with munitions that are increasingly made by the very people that we offshored our supply chains to. And the fact that, I saw this in the Senate, the fact that you would have people say, we should send an unlimited number of munitions to this conflict, even though we don't make those munitions in the United States of America anymore, the complete disconnect between their views on foreign policy and economic policy made me realize again that we're governed by people who aren't up to the job. Until 4 months ago, when the American people actually gave the country a government it deserved. And obviously we're very early days, but I think that we've done more in 4 months to solve these problems. But this is not a 5, a 10, this is a 20-year project to actually get America back to common sense economic policy.
Well, thank you. That was a real downer for a moment. I appreciate you brought the mood back up. This is very helpful. Let's talk about the workforce piece and education, because you mentioned education system, which at this point, interestingly, means almost two different things. Yes. There's what is going on with universities, and there's what is going on with how we would actually train people in these kinds of skills that we need, that would be good jobs. I guess it's a two-part question. On the university side, do you see what's going on there as mostly sort of just a sideshow minimizes it? It's incredibly important, but it is unrelated to the question of how we actually reskill correctly? Or do you think these two things fit together somehow, that we need to get the universities more engaged in this process and also have other ways to do it?
I think of it as extremely connected, though it's not necessarily obvious at the surface level. First of all, I never expect Harvard or Yale or the Ohio States of the world. They're not primarily going to be doing skilled craftsman training. Okay, some of the state schools you might see that, but really this is going to be something that happens with particular unions are going to have a big role in this, community colleges are going to have a big role in this, industry is going to have a big role in this. I don't think the skilled crafts are going to be brought back by the 4-year-plus university. That's just not their role. But what the 4-year-plus university, one of the most important things that it does, obviously it trains hopefully very smart people, but it produces really the ground level of the innovation that the economy is going to run on for the next 10 or 15, 20 years, okay? So if I want people in Indiana to be manufacturing the next generation pharmaceuticals, those pharmaceuticals have to get developed in the first place. And for them to get developed in the first place, I need places like Harvard to be doing really groundbreaking biomedical research. What I don't need out of Harvard is for the science to be so broken that 80% of the biology papers produced don't actually replicate. And that reproducibility crisis is one of the main reasons why I think universities are broken. What I really don't need to happen is I can't let Harvard have such an explicitly racist and in violation of the Civil Rights Act approach to how it funds and trains scientists that the best and the brightest are being cut out of that process altogether. So these things are very much connected. But I mean, look, I am not anti-university. I'm not anti-Harvard. What I am is a person who recognizes what should be obvious to every single person at every elite university in the country, which is the model is broken, it doesn't work, and they're violating the social contract they have with the people of the country, and the people are now saying, we need you to change. And these institutions are really going to be confronted, and thanks to President Trump, have already been confronted with a choice. You can accept democratic accountability and you can reform, or you can accept that the government is not going to treat you kindly, we're not going to fund your garbage, and we're not going to support you unless you do the job the American people need you to do.